One thing is sure, a great change of our psychological attitude is imminent. That is certain.
Why?
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
Hello all, welcome back to Consciousness Rising, and it's good to be back making videos again. And yep, that intro there that I put on the beginning of this video was the great Carl Jung talking about the importance of psychology. And you know, from my perception, we live in a very, very anti-psychological age, which is problematic, very problematic. We don't even know who we are, and I've thought that for a while. You know, I believe we're actually quite a young race in some ways. But then I also have theories in my head about, you know, how William Blake said we're a god in ruins, that things have happened to us to devolve us and to make us forget who we are. So my channel, in a way, is about, you know, remembering who we are. And I think Carl Jung, you know, to me, he's a great sage, and I've learnt lots from him. And yeah, that's why I put that at the beginning. I'm going to hopefully do a bit more of that in my upcoming videos, just to make them a bit more professional, and you know, not just to, and that's what I want my work to do as well. Is not just to listen to me, just to point people in the direction of these great minds and great thinkers and sages that have walked the planet before. You know, that have come way before me. Because I stand, you know, I stand on the shoulder of giants. I've always paid, you know, respect to those that come before me, because this is where a lot of my wisdom comes from, and you don't need to get it from a bloody channeled entity. I'm really not comfortable with all that anymore. I was at one point, but I believe, as David Hawkins said, everything that's needed to be known has been spoken by an incarnate soul. So I believe that fully. So yeah, often I will rant about people that I think are important figures, because these are the sages, and I'm very passionate about the wisdom that they bring. And with today's title, I'm very, very passionate about this topic, because especially the conscious parenting. I've spoken about that before, but this video is kind of a mix of expanding on the idea of conscious parenting, but also how children develop. And I'm talking more about psychology here as well, but I'm also talking about, you know, there's a big thing on touch in this, and how important touch is. And I'm just going to read the whole thing. I found this fantastic bit of research, and yeah, there is going to be a bit of me just reading in this, and that's fine, because this knowledge is important. But yeah, this one is on the development of children and conscious parenting. Okay, so I'll get going. I want to talk about language and how children and babies communicate. Now, the baby's first language is so obvious to me. The first noise we ever make when we sort of, you know, are pulled into this existence through birth is crying. That first cry, you know, and as I've put there, crying is a baby's first language. A child cries in order to get its basic needs met. Okay, because it hasn't developed language yet. It hasn't developed how to think in a certain way, and it can't ask what, you know, it can't ask you for food, so it has to cry. It can't ask you that it's uncomfortable, tell you that it's uncomfortable. It has to communicate through crying. And, you know, I'm not talking down to people when I talk about this, but it's so important to recognise this, because, as I've put there, a child never cries for no reason. There's always a reason, whether it's pain, it needs comfort, it needs food from the mother, or whatever. There's always a reason for it. And it's a bit similar to, you know, when I see kids in school and they have, quote unquote, what other people perceive as poor behaviour. That behaviour is a message. Now for babies, because I don't want to go too much into that, because that gets my back up a bit, because there's a lot of people working in education that do not understand mental health and the deeper things that I talk about. And that's doing a whole other number on people. I'm going to talk about that a bit in this video anyway, but I just want to stay with babies at the moment. So a baby is extremely vulnerable and relies on its parental figures. The parental figures are so key, and this is why conscious parenting is so important, because conscious parenting is the greatest gift you can give, not just to your child, but to the next generation, and to make a better world. You make a better world by conscious parenting. It starts with the parenting, because the child is going to be a reflection of those relationships. And I'm going to rant a bit here about this, because this really, really annoys me. Ignoring a child who is crying is neglect. Now, I've heard some horrific stories in my time. And one of the things that I hear sometimes is, oh, don't give in to it. And I'm talking about maybe a 3-month-old baby here, because you're making a rod for your own back. Absolute nonsense. Or say that the baby's playing you. The baby cannot think in that way to manipulate. It's vile adults who manipulate people, not babies. I want to be really, really clear about that, because nothing annoys me more than that. And I've heard stories of people, they'll run out of crying eventually. I'll just wait there and I'll stand there and I'll wait until they run out of crying. That is neglect, I'm afraid, and that is abuse. And it really makes me cross, because that does damage. Oh, they won't remember it. Yes, they will. Unconsciously and subconsciously they will remember it, because they're a reflection of everything. They're in a different state of consciousness. They will remember it. Not consciously, but unconsciously. And that will do damage in adult life. So this is vital to understand. Ignoring a child who is crying is neglect and abuse. There's no other word for it. And as I've put there, many old forms of pedagogy have wrongly taught that a baby is manipulating its mother by crying for no reason or for a power struggle. And we're talking about a baby here, for Christ's sake. And it's just so crazy that this is still in the year 2022 or whatever it is. Yeah, it's 2022. This is still some people's beliefs. It's so disgusting to me. And that's people say about a Great Awakening, they don't even understand this. Yeah, right. Power struggle with a 3-month-old baby. Yeah. Read Alice Miller. All of her work is so fantastic. She'll talk to you about pedagogy and how it's so evil. So that is the baby's first language. Crying, it's a communication. Just as later, a behaviour is a communication. I'm going to jump about a bit here, because as a child develops, their next language is not really talking, although they obviously can talk. They say a lot more through their play. The child's next language, as they develop and become sort of primary school age, what we're looking at here is play. Everything they do in play, whether it's crushing trucks together, or it's throwing things, or it's having wars or whatever, that's an expression of emotion. And most people don't understand this either. I mean, you expect children to go in at 5 years old or 4 years old, whatever it is now, into education and sit there by a desk and just do bloody rote learning. It's just so alien to me that people don't understand this. Children need play. It's so important for their development. Play is the child's second language. People often say it's the first. It's not. Crying's the first. I just want to correct that. And I people that say that play is the first language, I understand where they're coming from, because it is important that people recognise that. But I think crying's the first language. I think play is the next language. Okay, and this is a quote from Virginia Axeline, and she wrote a brilliant book on play therapy called, I think it's called Dibs in Search of Self, and that book is fantastic. And I highly recommend that. So she says, play therapy is based upon the fact that play is the child's natural medium of self-expression. It is an opportunity which is given to the child to play out his feelings, just like I just expressed, and problems. So he's playing out his feelings and problems through play. Okay? Just as in certain types of adult therapy, an individual talks out his difficulties. Now, I understand fully what she's saying here, and that's why, as a therapist, I'm very lucky in the fact that I do work with young children, teenagers, special needs, and adults. I work with such a broad spectrum, and I fully understand what she's saying here. When I work with, a 5 or 6 year old, I'm not going to work with them in the same way as an adult. When I work with an adult, in my private office, they come and I have 2 chairs at a certain angle, and they mostly talk. I do other forms of therapy with adults. I've done Santre, I've done art with adults. You can still use those things. However, with a child, you cannot expect a child of 5 or 6 to sit there and just talk to you for 45 minutes about their issues, because they haven't got the reasoning and understanding at that age. So what I often do is I have resources, and I have certain toys and tools and games that I play. Look, is about me trying to work out through their play and how they are, what's going on for them. And I've seen some amazing things. Sometimes it's, like I said, it can be as simple as they might hit a toy or a figurine and say that the figurine's dead. And that might be their way of actually trying to process a grief that they've had in their life. I mean, that's one example, but rage often comes out in their play. And they have reasons for rage. Often the rage they feel is at the parental figures. And that might be for a perfectly reasonable and good reason, but they act it out through play. Now, what's nice is you see that development in children. When you work with children of all different ages, you see that development, and you kind of get this feeling from when they start to talk more. And I've actually seen children as young as 5 and 6 go through this stage of, say they've had, 14 sessions with me. The first few sessions, it's all play-based. Very rare, very, very little talking. And then by sort of session 10, 11, 12, they're talking. They're still playing. But they've moved naturally through the relationship and through the trust that they've built in me, from playing out their feelings, to discussing their feelings. And that's quite amazing, and it's quite a magical thing to experience. So yeah, the next language is play. The first is crying. Okay, going to jump back a little bit here, but I think it's necessary because this is going to lead me into touch. Okay, now I am not judging anyone who can't breastfeed. I'm just saying that. I am not judging anyone. But babies need to be breastfed, not just for the best source of natural nutrition. It is also a bonding between mother and child. And there's loads of research on this. And please, as I say again, I'm not judging, because I know there are some circumstances where mothers can't breastfeed because there's complications or whatever. I'm not judging people. I know that things go wrong sometimes. But what I'm saying is, naturally, for the development of a child, that bond and that nutrition is best from the breast. And it also, it really does say to me, this is the first touch. This is the natural touch between mother and baby. It is extremely important to child development, and children who are touch deprived often do not do so well. And I've left a bit off that slide, I'm not sure why, but I'm going to go to the next slide now. This next slide is basically this whole research that I found, and I'm going to read the whole thing out because it's so amazing, and I'm so glad that I found it. So this is the importance of touch, okay? And this came from a research paper from Bridget Coiler, I think her name. Yeah, I've put her name at the bottom, Bridget Coiler. So she says, no matter how well nourished and intellectually stimulated a child is, going without human touch can stunt his mental, emotional, and even physical growth. It potentially affects the child for years to come. In fact, according to a May 2010 article in Scientific American, orphaned children who experience touch deprivation early in life have altered states of oxytocin and vasopressin, 2 hormones important for social bonding, even 3 years after being placed with a family. Okay, so the damage is done already, and that damage lasts for 3 years even after they've now got a connection with human beings. So this is vital information, because I think, especially in the West, we are massively touch deprived. And I'm not talking sexual here. I'm talking, natural touch for human beings. We're not meant to be deprived of this. This is very, very important. Okay, she goes on. Touch is essential for human survival. Babies who are deprived of touch can fail to thrive. They lose weight and even die. That's how important it is. It has been shown, in, I'm going to jump about here, that babies do shrivel and die. They literally shrivel and die. That are deprived of touch. Babies and young children who do not get touched also have lower levels of growth hormone. Again, what I said about shriveling, that's actually been seen by people. I've heard people talk about this, in some of these awful places where children are basically just left to rot. It's awful in these care homes in different countries. I can't remember where it is now, but so they actually have lower level of a growth hormone, so they're not going to develop. And therefore, she goes on to say there, so a lack of touch can actually stunt a child's growth. The immune systems of children who are deprived of touch may also be weaker than those who receive plenty of physical affection. Plenty of touch earlier in life can lead to physiological changes that might protect against later disease, including cardiovascular disease. This is fascinating stuff. In addition to the impact on physical growth and development, touch boosts a child's brain development too. This has an impact on everything from short-term behaviour to long-term mental and emotional development. Babies who receive a lot of touching sleep better at night and are less fussy during the day. According to paediatrician Dr. William Sears, children who are not touched enough have higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which can actually damage brain tissue in the hippocampus, the part of the brain involved with memory and learning. So you're actually causing what we're talking about here is a massively touch-deprived child actually can become brain damaged, which is fascinating. This is a slide I've put in because I think this is really key to understand. In the West, our education system is predominantly left-brained. This is definitely deliberately done. And what it does is it kills off our intuition, which is our greatest gift of guidance. I have heard the most awful things said about children in my time. Children who daydream, that's a magical thing. That is a magical thing they're engaged in. And that should never be told, they should never be told that that's wrong. Some children also have more energy than other children and need to be involved in physical things. More sports, more running. We in the West treat every child as a lab rat. And it's conditioning. And what they're doing is they're killing off that right brain. That creative, empathic side. And we wonder why we've got so much mental health issues in the West. Well, in the world. It's not just a Western thing, but I do think we're massively touch deprived in the West. But our intuition is our greatest gift. It's what connects us to the world we live in. And it's drilled out of us from a very, very early age, which is disgusting. I have a lot to say about education, believe me, because I see so much. And it's horrible what I see, and I feel so bad for children. But that right brain, we need a holistic education that caters to both. Melanie Klein. One of the many interesting and surprising experiences of the beginner in child analysis is to find in even very young children a capacity for insight which is often far greater than that of adults. I want to give her a high five for that, because when I've been doing my job quite a while now, but that is so true. If you get a child at the right age, they have a magic about them because they haven't been as conditioned as an adult. They do often have these tremendous insights, and sometimes I've been sat in therapy with children and they've floored me with what they've said. I've almost took a step back within myself because their emotional understanding is incredible. And they look at the world in a magical way that gets so killed out of us because of this left brain programming that we're under. So she is so right there. And yeah, I see it. I see it on a daily basis. Children do have a greater insight than a lot of adults. And that's because of the conditioning. Because we've been robbed of our natural human birthrights. Intuition, joy, empathy, compassion. It's all been tropes. It's been attacked. So she's so right there. Alice Miller, I've got two slides. I always talk about Alice Miller because she is phenomenal. She says here, wherever I look, I see signs of the commandment to honour one's parents, and nowhere of a commandment that calls for the respect of a child. Absolutely right. It, you know, it's so often said, isn't it? Parents always right, parents always right. That's not true. Some parents are messed up individuals and then pass that on to their children. So she's so right there, the child's left out. Just do as you're told. I mean, I remember from my own childhood, there was, children should be seen and not heard. What a disgusting statement that is. Vile human adults say things like that. Children don't. And I've put here, it's very, very sad, but for some children there is no escape. The sad truth is that because most people haven't dealt with their own issues, they then go on to project their frustrations onto their own vulnerable children. That is Alice Miller 101. If you read all of her books, she really does attack this issue because that's what she's talking about, intergenerational trauma. If it is not dealt with, if you haven't done the shadow work, then why are you even having a child? Because you are going to place all that crap on them. Is that fair? No, it isn't. And this is the crux of my message on this video. A true parent must always be conscious of their own issues and deals with them before becoming a parent. They do the shadow work. They bring consciousness to the door. And then they give the gift of conscious parenting in order that this world may be saved from the absolute hellhole that it's becoming. I want to talk about inner child work here. This is something that I'm very, very deeply passionate about. Inner child work is a deep and introspective form of healing the past. We have all been children and have all suffered trauma or abuse at those in authoritarian roles, be they parents, teachers or other adults. We've all got this stuff. We've all got it. Some to greater extent than others. And I've put there, getting in touch with our inner child and learning to heal these parts of the self is very healing shadow work. When I do inner child work with people, we're looking at the past and we're looking at where these beliefs about self come from, and it's usually from damaged adults, whether they be parents, teachers, I don't know, whoever, like football coaches. It can come from many different ways, but it's nearly always adults. I'm not saying it because obviously children do get bullied by other children as well. That's a huge part of it as well, and I haven't really touched on that yet. However, what I'm talking about here is inner child wounds that we receive from authoritarian figures, and we've all got this. As part of my training, we had to deal with this, and we had to do a paper on it, and it got me to explore some pretty painful parts of my past, and I'll admit, it was very, very difficult. However, it's so rewarding afterwards, and you can do this with EFT, which is what I'm kind of going to touch on next, I think. So these two books, highly recommend. That one on the left is the one that I had to read when I was becoming a therapist, and we were told before you even read it, make sure you're in therapy because this is very deep work. Homecoming, Reclaiming and Healing Your Inner Child is such a brilliant book, and in that book is exercises that you can do with your therapist or on your own. And this is true shadow work. This is really, really deep shadow work. It's like unfucking yourself from all those that damaged individuals that fucked you up, basically. That's what it is. Now, what I like about Matrix Reimprinting using EFT, that book on the right, is it shows you kind of how to do inner child work using EFT. Now you're flying. If you can do that, you are flying, because you're going to rewrite your unconscious programs that you've received in those first 7 years or beyond. That I talk about so often. So that book is really, really powerful, and I've actually done that I've done this work with clients, and I'm not going to go into details, but it was some of the most healing and rewarding work that they said they've ever done. And it nearly brought me to tears, to be honest, because to see someone be able to get in touch with these deep wounds and then heal themselves from it and free themselves from the past, that is amazing. And I just felt so humbled to be able to be part of this with people. So there's 2 book recommendations. I'm gonna start doing more book work soon, like reading from certain books, and also like I might even start just doing book reviews as well on my channel, because I think, again, I want to point you in the direction of all this great stuff that's out there, because we're living in a sea of information and knowledge. There's no excuse to be ignorant anymore. I saw this meme and this is so good. This says it all. I don't even need to say anything, do I? I'm just gonna be quiet for a minute or so. You want to know how to change the world? That's how you do it. In that meme right there, that meme says it all. You shield the next generation from that crap that was given to you. That takes willpower, that takes healing, that takes EFT, that takes getting in touch with the shadow and integrating it, not running from it and doing some hippy dippy new age shit. Because that stuff in the new age is dangerous. All it's making is people that just disassociate. And don't get me wrong, people disassociate for a reason, but that's just making it worse. Just ignore it, it will go away. Love and light, love and light, love and light. Love and light will kill you. It will eat you up inside because you're not dealing with the shadow. That is true work right there. I just think that meme is absolutely beautiful. And this is the last slide. And I'm going to leave the last slides. I want her to have the last word on it, because to me, all of her books are fantastic. So I'm going to read that out and leave you to it. Someday we will regard our children not as creatures to manipulate or to change, but rather as messengers from a world we once deeply knew, but which we have long since forgotten, who can reveal to us more about the true secrets of life and also our own lives than our parents were ever able to. Alright guys, see you in the next one.